You're listening to the Mental Money Podcast, the show that shows you how to master your mind to maximize your money. This show is for people who love to watch their bank accounts grow while shifting their relationship to money. Without further ado, let's get these insider insights from today's leading expert. Okay, so my name is Natalie, and you are either coming back to the Mental Money Podcast or this is your first time listening to it. And I'm excited to have on Craig today. Craig and I have like a weird interaction. I actually met him through two people that referred me to someone else that referred me to Craig. And I was in the process of writing the book. And then they said, you know what, he just wrote a book. Maybe he can give you some insight into what to do next. Because I was at an impasse about the editing, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And then they were just like, yeah, he's also in the business space. Maybe this will be a good person to get in contact with. And then here we are, a year later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Year and change later.
Yeah, I
It's
know.
wonderful.
Yeah, awesome. So Craig, today we're going to be talking about either money and mindset. We touched a little bit about mindset during our follow-up call earlier this week. And you said some things that were just like, huh, I think other people deserve to hear about this. So talk to me. How are
I
you?
love that you said talking about money and mindset, because one of the things that I came to understand early on is that you have to make all the money in your mind first
Oh, yeah.
before you see it in hand. And it sounds so kind of facetious and cliche, but money is a byproduct of the things that you do. And so your body only follows what your mind thinks.
Yeah.
And so if you're not thinking about making money or thinking strategically to how to build a business, from my perspective, and I'm a executive coach, serial entrepreneur, like I help people to build businesses. A business really is a system that creates tangible customer value, and your customers pay for that value. Right. So you have to think about the value that people want in your mind first before you can create it in reality. And once you do that, then the money flows. So it's very counterintuitive, but it's something that holds true 100% of the time.
Right. Could you give us like another real world application of like how the mind and like having that mind unchecked will bleed into something else? Like I want good examples of how that is real of outside of big business or inside of business.
Well, for me, it's just like I can't help but stay within the business frame of mind, because to me, your life is a business and you're the byproduct of that business. And so honestly, like the decisions that you make within your life will either generate a positive, money positive, for example, results, or it can generate a negative or money negative result.
Right.
So being very educated on how you make decisions and understanding the opportunity cost of a decision, what you have to give up to get something, that's one of the core tenets of a money mindset. It's not exactly about receiving tangible money per se in the form of dollars, euros, or whatever, but it's also about how you want to receive a positive result from a decision that you make.
Right.
And when you do that consistently, this is really going to help you to live a better, more fruitful, and prosperous life.
Right. Okay, so give us an example of like something maybe that you recently had to kind of wrap your mind around, or that you had to check your mindset on, that you now see the byproduct of, or you now see how the outcome could have been different had you not checked yourself.
Really fantastic question. So a perfect example would be how I operate, or how I operated my business. So when I first got into executive coaching 3 years ago, I started off just working on a one-on-one basis. And for me, I had limited my perspective of what business could be to me only working on a one-on-one capacity. And I told myself I would never do one-to-many coaching. I would never do group coaching. I would never build a community. It would just be one-on-one with myself and my client. Right. The irony about going through the pandemic and launching a business through the pandemic is that a lot of my one-on-one interactions got blown up. And so I was forced to really think more abundantly and pivot and figure out how was I going to keep my business operating.
Right.
Furthermore, I consider myself to be a digital nomad, and I love having the ability to live and work from anywhere.
Mm.
Well, being limited to one-on-one in-person coaching does not allow me to live and work from anywhere.
Yeah.
So the business model that I had to pivot to was a business model that I thought I would never do. And so
Mm.
I just launched my new entrepreneur community called the Solo CEO Club, where I really help solopreneurs escape the hustle and go from chaos to cash flow. But
Mm.
this is a community experience. This is a group experience. This is a one-to-many experience. And I told myself I would never do that. But this is the very exact thing that I'm doing on a daily basis. And sometimes the things that you don't want to do are the things that you need to do.
Right.
Because like my grandfather always told me, he's like, son, everything that you want is not everything that you need. But if you have everything that you need, you'll have everything that you'll want over the long term.
Right.
And so
Right.
by absorbing that and being somebody who practices what they preach and preach what they practice, I had to do something that I didn't want to do. But that's led to me having more money and more cash flow in my business. And I love it.
Got you. That's a great example. So what were okay, let me backtrack. I find that whenever business owners are in situations like these, right, where you're at a junction where you have to make a decision or you have to pivot really starkly in a way that could largely impact your ability to make income, your ability to grow, your ability to scale, a couple things set in, right? Fear,
Mm-hmm.
given, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is this going to work? Am I going to be successful? Does this make sense? Like, how do I know how do you know what to do in this situation, right? But also, let's say you get over that initial hump of fear, which most entrepreneurs either do,
Mm-hmm.
and then they start making their way over into the new, whatever the new pivot is. What messages are you hearing inside your head? What justifications do you make? What concessions do you make that don't stop you from becoming successful on the other side? It sounds like you ended up on a good side of it. You could have made all the right decisions and still had failed, right? But what were some of the decisions and
Mm-hmm.
thoughts that you had leading into now what you're doing?
Great question. Well, a first answer is understanding that not making a decision is making a decision. See,
Mm,
so many people are consumed by analysis paralysis,
right.
and that fear of failure prevents people from taking action. As
Mm,
we kind of introduced in our conversation, you make all the money in your mind before you see it in hand.
right.
Well, your inability to make a decision is going to adversely affect your wallet. And
Mm,
I tell my clients, like, all the money that you're going to make in business is dependent upon the decisions that you make
yeah.
and the decisions that you do not make.
Right.
So if something is not working for me as is, then the only logical decision to make is to do something different.
Mm,
And in order to be different, you have to do different. And this is something that people don't understand. I mean,
yeah.
it's the classic definition of insanity, doing the
Mm,
same thing over and over, expecting different results.
right.
It don't work like that.
Mm,
So, understanding kind of those truths, you need to realize that whenever you're doing something different and you're doing something you've never done before, inevitably you're going to make mistakes.
yeah.
You mentioned that we're both authors, and my book is entitled Burdens of a Dream.
Mm,
And the reason why I entitled it Burdens of a Dream, because every dream has a burden or a cost to bear. But
mm,
if you're willing to pay that cost, you'll be able to live a life that most people dream of.
right.
And one of the most popular chapters within that book is a chapter entitled Fail. And fail is just an acronym for first attempt in learning.
Mm,
So when you understand that like your business is nothing but a series, or your life is nothing but a series of your next best educated guess, you put one foot in front of the other
yeah.
and you make a move.
Yeah.
And that move may be a good move or it may be a bad move.
Mm,
But either way, there's learnings within those moves that are going to tell you what to do and what not to do.
yeah.
And then you eliminate the things that didn't work, you figure out what does work, and then you double down and then you do that all over again. And
Mm,
so when you can get comfortable with being uncomfortable and you understand that, like, okay, we're all trying to do our best with what we have.
right.
We're going to mess up. It's not a mistake until you keep doing the wrong things over and over again. This just really kind of takes the emotion out of things. I mean, life is not easy, but it can be very, very simple. And
Right.
if you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, you eventually get to where you want to go. But
Mm.
you just have to be consistent. You have to have faith. And most importantly, you have to take action.
Okay, well said. So how do we get over that fear of failure, right? Because that's, I mean, it's a real thing. That's the first
Mhm.
thing I even mentioned, right? Like,
Yeah.
because fear is real. It's
Yes.
not like, even though you approached it from a very logical, it makes sense. Like no one can really argue what you just said.
Right.
Makes sense. It's practical. It's applicable. We know well, most people know it on like a very real level, right?
Hmm.
But then the fear sets in, and then we have to face it. So like, what
Hmm.
do we do when we don't even really fear being successful as much as we fear it not working, how we will appear in front. You know what? Okay, let's have a
Hmm.
vulnerable moment, right?
Yeah.
I am 33. Damn. I'm 33 years old, right? And I have a child. I take care of my mom who's retired.
Hmm.
Great. Thankful I was able to retire her. Um, I also take care of, I have two primary businesses with a bunch of different streams of income outside of that, right?
Hmm.
Um, I I've been an entrepreneur for over 9 years.
Hmm.
I retired from corporate a long time ago, and I still fear failing.
Yeah.
Like if one little thing goes wrong, I mean, I have my, because I've been doing this for so long, because I have my mindset checked, right? And
Hmm.
because I set myself up in certain little ways, so I don't, almost, it doesn't become a self-fulfilling prophecy. There you go,
Yes.
right? But I still have those moments where fear sets in, and if I don't get ahead of it, I can see how it becomes like, it just a point becomes a line, becomes a direction.
Hmm.
I'm saying
Yes.
so when we have those moments of fear, because I have my system, but for those who
Hmm.
don't have those systems in places yet, when we have those moments of fear, because they don't go away, they're always
Right.
going to be there. Will Smith talks about like being the biggest mega star in the world and still talks about fearing being poor. How, who knows, whatever, right? So, but how do we create systems around our emotions, because they're real, they're meant to be here, they're meant to alarm us, they're meant to give us information. What do we do with that information? How do we kind of continue to strive thrive in those environments?
Hmm. Well, what you just did by being vulnerable and first of all, acknowledging that fear is real, acknowledging that you're a human, we're all human. Like this is something that everybody experiences. And that's a beautiful thing because none of us are different. Like
Right,
we're all unique and special, but then oftentimes we're all not unique and special. We
right.
experience the same things. So, first of all, acknowledging that and being vulnerable is step one
Mhm.
because what I've come to understand that like fear is nothing but energy. Emotions are energy. Now, how we transmute that energy is another story because
Right.
energy really is neither negative nor positive. It's
Mhm.
neutral.
Right.
But fear is kind of like a negative form of energy.
Mhm.
But, kind of a way you flip that, instead of me being fearful, let me turn that into a positive, which makes me become more excited.
Mm.
And it all goes back to the mental state. Like
Yeah.
you make money in your mind before you see it in your hand. Like you
Mhm.
win the battle in your mind
Yeah.
before you do on the field. And
Yeah.
it's just something that comes with time, that comes with experience.
Mhm.
It's not something that happens overnight. This mentality that I have did not happen overnight,
Yeah.
but it was developed and cultivated by understanding that like if I don't make a decision to change, nothing will ever change.
Right.
And so the answer that's always going to happen in life is no. If I don't do anything, the answer will always be no.
Yeah.
But it's not until I take action and get my mind right and start doing stuff that I have the opportunity to convert that no into a yes.
Mm.
And when that happens, that empowers you, and you start realizing, all this stuff's in my mind. And after a while, like you said, you build up your systems, you build up your processes. Another great pro tip is to build up a network of people that you can trust. I mean, you can't do this alone.
Yeah.
Anybody who thinks that they can do this alone is going to be in for a wake up call.
Mm-hmm.
So I have my people, my peers, my mentors, even my mentees. I
Yeah.
call this the rule of ones, twos, and threes. So
Mm.
my ones are my mentors, people who I answer to, people who I learn from. The twos are a conversation like this. It's two like-minded peers, in the battlefield having a conversation, sharpening our swords. And
Right.
then the threes, I have my mentees, my clients, the people that I teach. So
Mm.
essentially, I'm constantly learning, I'm constantly teaching, and I'm constantly applying. But then I leverage that network of people that I brought into my life to be vulnerable with, because I've learned that you can learn a message from anybody.
Yeah.
And it's never about the messenger, it's always about the message.
Yeah.
And anybody can help you to move forward when you're having difficulties and experiencing fear.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a long-winded way of answering your question. It's not easy, it's simple, but you just have to take action. You have to flip the negative into a positive. You have
Mm.
to be vulnerable. You have to acknowledge that fear exists. And if you're stuck, talk to somebody,
Right.
get help, get that energy out of your system,
Mm.
and move forward and convert that no into a yes.
I love that you're using the word convert selfishly because
Yeah,
that's the name of my book. And that's kind of the whole point, right? Like
yeah.
just moving from one state to another and like always kind of having those checks and balances so that you can move. Otherwise, it's nothing's gonna change, nothing's gonna move.
Mm-hmm.
I think I realized that, and this is a recent epiphany. Remember, I've been doing this for like 9 years, right?
Right.
Recent epiphany that
Mm-hmm.
I I realized why my brain works as a strategist and why and how it's hurt me, but also helped me in certain ways. Because when I didn't have the best control over my money, right? Financial strategist now. When I
Right.
didn't have the best control over my money, it's because the mindset was, okay, you're going to figure it out. So you don't have to worry about having checks and balances. You don't have to worry about having a system. Don't worry about it. Just do what you got to do. It's always the bill's always going to get paid. You'll figure it out. But that works against you because you
Right.
continue to form these maladaptive behaviors and continue to feed these maladaptive behaviors that don't really lend to moving forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then on the flip side of that, when I started getting control over this mindset and getting control over my money, I was like, oh no, we're gonna figure it out, but we're also gonna grow. We're gonna figure out how to take this and make it that.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of what you said that triggered that thought is the excitement piece,
Yeah.
kind of learning to get excited about that. And I was just like, oh, let's make a plan. Let's see what happens if we did this, if we did that, instead of living in fear. Again, the fear is still there. Don't get me wrong. I have a kid to feed. That fear is lingering. All right. And I've learned to accept it and honor it, but it's still there, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do when you feel afraid? Like, do you have a system in your mind?
So for me, when I feel that fear, the first thing I do is actually go out and find nature. So
Mm-hmm.
luckily, like I live in Columbus, Ohio, and there's plenty of nice parks that you can get away to just
Mm-hmm.
relax.
Yeah.
I've always loved, like I said, being out in nature and being by water, and just hearing like the breeze, the leaves, the stillness, like hearing the water go by. For some reason, it just kind of puts me into a nice little theta state. And like
Gotcha.
a theta state is is a level of brain activity where you're just in harmony and you're in calm. And a
Mm,
theta state is something that happens like right before you go into a deep sleep or right after you get up from a deep sleep. And
mm,
it feels like serenity and peace. And
okay.
so for me, by knowing that, like when my energy is all messed up and I'm in a fearful state of mind, I like to try to get to nature. But if I can't, I like to find a quiet place. I'll even pull over into a parking lot and
Mm,
just chill and put on some calm music. That's another way I get to really dissipate all that crazy energy that's going on in my mind.
yeah.
And then furthermore, if those things don't happen, like I said, I have an amazing resource like of friends, and I'm blessed to have a very supportive family that has thought I've been crazy, doing a lot of my entrepreneurial ventures. but they've always had my back no matter what. And I
Yeah.
could call my sister for certain things. I could call my mother for certain things. I could call my father for certain things, depending on the topic.
Right.
And a 5 minute conversation with them will completely wipe away anything I have in
Yeah.
my mind.
Yeah.
And so those are kind of like my two strategies of getting the nature, maybe listening to music, or I mean, three strategies, or calling on my friends or family, and they help me to really get out of that fear mindset.
Got you. Okay. So
Yeah.
this week when we spoke, you said something that was just like, yeah, let's go ahead and talk about this.
Yeah.
Okay. Talk to me about your newsletter,
Mm-hmm.
the title of it.
Mm-hmm.
What prompted, I'm saying a lot of questions. What
Yeah.
prompted you to write it, and what can we learn as an outcome of
Mm-hmm.
understanding the concept?
Got you. So the title of my newsletter is the Solo CEO newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
But what it's about is really stimulating conversations, real conversations about business and life. And
Mm-hmm.
so my most recent newsletter was entitled The Friction of Truth.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a heavy newsletter, a deep newsletter that probably went over a lot of people's heads.
Yeah.
But the whole concept of the friction of truth is talking about how people, when they experience the reality of something
Mm-hmm.
that's so different from the idea of something, that dissonance between those two experiences or the thought of an experience creates this friction. And it's this very, very uncomfortable feeling. So
Yeah.
the perfect example of what we're talking about is how so many people have been given this idea of what entrepreneurship could be.
Yeah.
Super quick 6 figures,
Mm-hmm.
life on a beach, laptop lifestyle, flying around the world with your
Yeah.
significant other, just chilling.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality of entrepreneurship, particularly if you're a person of color, if you're starting from scratch, if you don't have access to capital or resources,
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurship can be brutal.
Yeah.
And when people experience that, they're like, what happened?
Mm-hmm.
And that friction causes so many people just to give up, to get angry, to get flustered. But what prompted me to write that was I've always been a truth teller, a truth seeker. From as being a child, my mother always told me that curiosity killed the Craig, because I always ask all these questions. And I tell people I have the same 6 best friends from the day I was born. And their
Mm-hmm.
names are who, what, when, where, why, and how. They're
Jeez.
questions. But by me asking the right questions, I get the right answers.
Yeah.
And so I know when something doesn't appear to be right, I'm going to question it. And so many people don't question what they hear. And then
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, they blindly accept the stuff, the misinformation or disinformation. Then they get into the game of whatever they thought was going to be something. And that reality check hits them in the mouth. And so just prepping my audience and my listeners to let them know that, like, hey, entrepreneurship is not what you think. It's not easy, but it's simple. And the
Mm-hmm.
better I can equip you before you get into that battlefield, the better you'll perform. And so, like I said, we have those straight no chaser conversations about business and life, but just understand that, like, the reality of what you think something is probably isn't going to be, or probably isn't going to match the idea of what you think it is. So just
How,
prepare yourself before you get into any situation.
and how do we reconcile that?
How do you reconcile that? Well, again, that goes back to that whole conversation we had about fear. Like, when you understand the reality of something is different than the idea of something, you have to first acknowledge that. And then after you acknowledge that and you stay still, then you start to question it. That's why I said my 6 best friends are who, what, when, where, why, and how.
Mm.
So what is going on? Why is this happening? How can I understand this? When can I make change?
Mhm.
No,
Yeah.
what is my next best option? And
Yeah.
when you just go down that path, then you'll
Mhm.
start to get answers that will start pointing you in the right direction and help you to get back on your feet and do what you have to do.
Right. I think it also aligns you with the people who will help you too.
Yes.
I think that's probably as well, you're a consultant, so you're a coach, so really how you would know how to frame expectations versus reality. Because I feel like a lot of people, like you said, a lot of people walk into it blindly and then almost, and I've seen this with, like, I actually recently saw this on TikTok. Like, someone was talking about how, a course that they had taken was a scam. And I happened to have taken the same course and found great results from it. But I mean, I did the work. I
Right.
think they thought they were going to come out with the outcome without having done the work. And I'm just like, I'm not sure that's how that works, you know? So
Right.
she's expressing her grievance online. And when I'm listening to it, I don't hear any accountability
Mm.
whatsoever. Granted, great marketer. The person who like created the course or whoever they worked with for the copy and like the creatives, great marketer. Okay. So I could totally see why she could have felt like she bought into a lie. But then when she got smacked in the mouth with the reality of what that outcome was going to be and like how
Right.
to actually get to the outcomes, because he walked you through every single thing. There really are no questions left when
Right.
you mostly no questions unless they're like personal to your situation. But yeah, I think that's what happened, and I'm grateful for you writing something like that and really kind of making it a point to bring these things up because like you said, as people of color, specifically, who this podcast is catered to,
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to walk into this and realize about 2 months in that you can't pay your bills.
Yes.
That's a very real reality. So, as a man of color, what have you done? Like, what concessions have you made in order to kind of keep the boat going?
Oh, well, first of all, is just cutting back on what I call the fluff. I
Mm,
live a very, I hate that, I mean, this word minimalist has kind of gotten
mhm.
abused, but
Yeah.
I've never been somebody who's been attracted to the glitz and glamour. I've always appreciated the bare necessities. And that's
Yeah.
partly because of how I was raised and coming from a family that didn't have a lot of money. And whatever money my parents did have, they invested it into my education and getting us out of inner city public schools and going to the suburban schools, but we
Mhm.
never had anything really fancy to really, enjoy on. Never took family vacations or anything. So for me, I don't have the nicest newest car, but it's paid off.
Right.
I
Right.
don't have the nicest condo in the nicest neighborhood, but it's super affordable and I don't have high overhead.
Right.
I've made my business extremely lean. I don't need a fancy co-working space, even though I work in one. I got the bare minimal, co-working options.
Mm,
And so for me, by living lean and cutting down on the excess, this has allowed me to make sacrifices to really take most of my business proceeds and reinvest them into my business. So where I have been able to grow at a really good rate. And some people may say, well, I don't have much to show for it. But for me, I'm able to live a lifestyle that most people only dream of. I
right.
mean, this summer I was in Latin America for a month in Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina running my business.
Right.
I was in Puerto Rico all of December last year, being able to run and operate my business. So
Right.
for me, I've really decided to understand I have a certain lifestyle that I want to live, invest in more experiences, more so than certain things. Even, after a successful business venture, when I exited from my tech company in 2018 in Washington, D.C., I moved back to Ohio temporarily and stayed with family for a year or two to
Mm-hmm.
figure out my next best steps.
Mm-hmm.
And that crushed my ego.
Mm,
I was back, staying with family and I wasn't in my own place.
right.
That hurts for being, in your late 20s.
Right.
But that was the best decision I could have ever made because I was able to stack money, reinvest it, and able to get a car, to get a condo. So that's fine. You have to make sacrifices. And at the end of the day, it's all about the life you want to live. And it doesn't really matter what other people think or how they perceive what you're doing.
Yeah.
What do
So
you want for yourself? And
you've
then keep
defined,
on doing that
yes, you define success for yourself.
completely.
Yeah. That's key because I see a lot of people falling prey to that like social media lie they've been sold. You
Yeah.
know, when people and this is not a judgment call. Like, we want what we want. But
hmm
again, like how people don't really check why they want what they want or why like how they really got to the point where they thought that this was the standard of living. You know what I mean?
hmm
Instead of just being grateful for what you have and being able to kind of like curate a life where you have security, which is what you've done, it sounds like.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not where I want to be, but I'm on the path that I need to traverse.
Right.
And by having this vision, from early on and staying true to the vision. Because one of my clients, his name's Isaiah Fowler. He has this amazing Black-owned eyewear company called Suave Eyewear. And he always talks about everything starts with a vision. And I thought it was just so cliche and corny, but it's probably one of the most powerful statements I've heard in a while.
Yeah.
And by you creating a vision for your life and figuring out what you want and not what anybody else's wants, and then you figuring out how your business or how your job can help you to live that lifestyle, because ultimately your job or your business is a vehicle to take you where you want to go. But if you don't have a plan or a vision for your life, then where are you going?
Yeah.
You're not really going anywhere.
Right.
So, like I said, the onus is on us to really empower ourselves to understand that, like, we have way more power than we think we have, because so many of us have been brainwashed to think that we don't have any control, particularly, people of color. But once you understand how powerful you are and understand why things are set up to keep you disempowered, that should let you know that, like, you're stronger than what you think. And once you understand that, nobody can take that away from you.
Literally, the premise of my next book is exactly that. Like, there's a whole chapter dedicated to how the system is structured to keep you in that, like, subservient, captive bondage dungeon of a brain, like, and how you kind of can crawl yourself out of it. Scary thing to do.
Yes.
Everything in your reality will still challenge the idea that you're not there, but you're not there. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. I have to find the example, but yeah. So great points. Craig, if we want to get in contact with you, how do we do that? How do we understand the burdens of our dreams? How do we get in your newsletter, the collective? Like, how do we tap in?
So perfect. So to check out my website, it's called creativecraig.com. And how you spell that is CRE, the number 8, IVECRAIG.com. And all my social media handles are at Creative Craig. And I'm most active on Instagram. And then also to become a member of the Solo CEO Club, so you can escape the hustle and go from chaos to cash flow, all you have to do is go to www.jointhescc.com. And then to also get a copy of my book, Burdens of a Dream, you can just go to burdensofadream.com and get it on Amazon and ebook, paperback, hardback, or even audiobook if you like the sound of my voice. So that's how you can stay in contact with me.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for listening to the Mental Money Podcast. Please go ahead and remember to subscribe, but don't hoard all of this good information for yourself. Share this information with someone that you know could use it, especially if they need a shift in their mindset or someone who would love to have more money. So until we meet again, remember, like Uncle Snoop said, keep your mind on your money and your money on your mind.